I'm so thrilled to be here. I'm so thrilled to be celebrating 20 years of women in science. I'm going to be talking about a problem, and I'm going to be offering a number of solutions. So what is the problem? If you count the number of humans that are killed by different animals, you'll be surprised to learn that the mosquito is really at the top. So mosquitoes kill more humans than any other animal on Earth. It wouldn't be sharks, bears, elephants, crocodiles, or rabid dogs. It's mosquitoes. So how are mosquitoes killing us at such high frequencies? So they are major carriers of infectious diseases that in some cases have been with us for a very long time. So the earliest case of malaria was in 2700 BC. Then more recently, dengue has been killing people since 1992, yellow fever in 1690, and then it accelerates. So Zika was actually first discovered in 1947. Chikungunya, you've probably never heard of, in 1952. And then the question is, what next? These viruses keep coming out of areas where they're not biting, not causing people to be ill. So if we run through what malaria has done, so it's the biggest killer of all mosquito-borne diseases, 212 million cases in 2015, less than 500,000 deaths. And this number has dropped drastically since Bill and Melinda Gates put significant philanthropy into trying to eradicate malaria in their lifetime. This used to be at about 1 million 10 years ago. And malaria has claimed many famous victims. When I looked at this last night, many of our presidents have had malaria and survived. It killed 6 popes and all of these famous artists, politicians, and conquerors. So now if we look at dengue, so dengue is a more recent disease. It's now endemic throughout the tropics. Again, a huge killer. Infects huge swaths of the world with almost 100 million cases producing symptoms. And the symptoms are terrible. It's known as bone break fever. You're laid low for months and months. And there are no drugs that treat dengue, and it's proven to be extremely resistant to vaccine development. So if you have dengue, it is not good. Yellow fever, we are very lucky to have developed a highly effective vaccine. So the vaccine has almost knocked yellow fever to the point where it's no longer an issue. They estimate that 200,000 people have been saved during this 5-year period. And then more recently, again, chikungunya, you've never heard of it, causes symptoms very similar to dengue, again, this excruciating bone pain. It arose in about 1952 in exactly the same region where Zika was first found, sort of at the interstitial space between the forests in Africa and the human villages. So the viruses are going back and forth between animals and people, and then they're spread around the world. So you can see chikungunya made its trip from Africa throughout Asia, and then at a single point in 2013, it landed right around St. Martin Airport. So this is the first case. It's like in that little part in the Caribbean. And over the course of a year, it spread to 1 million people. So from one case, a vacationer wanting to have a wonderful time in the Caribbean, it then spread across the entire Caribbean basin, including South Florida. So the capacity of these diseases to arise rapidly, spread around the world rapidly, come into our hemisphere, and then spread there is what makes these diseases and the mosquitoes that carry them so very dangerous. It's rare to find someone in this audience who hasn't heard of Zika. So Zika is the first instance that we know of where a mosquito-borne disease not only sickens or kills the person who has been infected, it also causes severe birth defects in the children that are born from pregnant women. And so the birth defect that occurs when a mother is infected with Zika in the first trimester is microcephaly. So the failure of the cortical part of the brain, which encodes thoughts, feelings, actions, and memories, fails to develop, leading to this pronounced decrease in the size of the head. And again, I can't emphasize how devastating this is. You know, a mosquito bite, give you an itchy bite, it could kill you, or it could have these devastating effects on the unborn. And I think that this caught the world by surprise. So there's always a low rate of microcephaly, a birth defect that emerges during pregnancy. So people scoring in Bahia, this region in Brazil, there are low rates of microcephaly. And then you can see this incredible, alarming increase in microcephaly cases that have been reported. And the question is, where is this thing coming from? How could you get a 100-fold increase in microcephalic children over this course of time? And it became apparent that at the time, women were getting bitten, having these rashes and a little bit of fever during the first trimester, and then would give birth then to children with microcephaly. This was an association for many months. People were really worried about it, but I think that definitively sometime in early 2016, there were so many signs that it has to be the Zika virus, because you would see infections in people, the geographical location where the Zika cases were, and then the predominance of microcephaly. There's also been a lot of really important work in basic sciences showing that if you infect preparations of brain tissue with Zika, Zika goes into those brain cells and kills them, very selectively killing, again, those cells that give rise to the cortex that encode thoughts, feelings, actions, and memories. So how did Zika virus spread? The now familiar case that it first jumped from monkeys in Uganda, right very close to where Chikungunya emerged in humans. It then caused diseases in Nigeria. In all of these cases, it was a mild fever and rash. You didn't see these horrible birth defects. It then moved east into Southeast Asia and India, and then finally in French Polynesia. Something happened when the virus transited around the world. In these areas, it caused a mild rash and fever. In French Polynesia, there were all of a sudden instances of microcephalic babies or fetuses. And then there's this speculation. Somewhere in 2014, there was some big boating event, some sort of outrigger canoe event that brought many, many people from French Polynesia to Brazil. And this is when Zika took off and spread like wildfire throughout Brazil. So this isn't just a problem in Bahia, where people are being bitten by mosquitoes and giving birth to microcephalic children. There are regions in the southern tier of the United States where the mosquito that spreads Zika and these other diseases is at home. And so these are news reports from last year where these are all of the cases of Zika that have been reported in Florida. And the hotspot really is Miami-Dade County. And so last October, the CDC issued a travel advisory. Now, the CDC issues travel advisories. If, don't go to West Africa during the Ebola outbreak. Don't go to Hong Kong during the bird flu outbreak. But can you imagine, don't go to Miami-Dade County if you are pregnant, thinking of becoming pregnant, or because Zika can also be found in the semen of men if you're thinking of impregnating a woman. So this is really a striking case where, again, global health is local health. These sort of abstract problems happening to people halfway around the world are now coming to roost here. So how is this happening? How are these things coming from these obscure villages in Uganda and Kenya and ending up in South Beach in Miami? And so the answer is that humans have more global mobility due to jet travel than we have ever had. And so this leads to the rapid spread of disease. It isn't that the mosquitoes are flying across the Atlantic Ocean, landing in St. Martin. The mosquitoes, in some cases, if you fly around, there are mosquitoes on planes, but you know what it is? It's people on the planes who don't know that they're infected with these diseases. They land in St. Martin. The local mosquitoes are ready for them. They bite the person coming off the plane with the bathing suit and the beach balls, and then that causes a local cycle of infection. And I think also chic jet travel. This is one of my favorite pictures, back when traveling was really wonderful. So nevertheless, it does cause this globalization of disease very rapidly. What's another thing that brings mosquitoes around the world is things like this, the used tire trade. So there could be no more perfect home for a female mosquito looking to lay eggs. These tires warm up, so it's really, really great for young mosquitoes. They fill with water. And so at the point that the used tire trade started moving these tires around the world, there would be thousands of hitchhiker mosquitoes that would then come along for the ride, helping to then spread either sick mosquitoes or healthy mosquitoes, doesn't matter, into areas. So we're sort of doing everything we can to ensure that these mosquitoes move from the place where they started to go globally. So here's an example of how quickly this can happen. So this is the range of the mosquito that spreads Zika dengue, chikungunya, and yellow fever. So this is sort of the warmer southern states. This mosquito came in ships along with the slave trade in 1500 and quickly established itself throughout the southern US. In the 1980s, the Asian tiger mosquito arrived, one of the most annoying insects. It's this beautiful tiger-striped mosquito. It doesn't obey any of the normal rules of mosquito behavior. These guys will bite in the afternoon into the evening, so you can get out of the way by just going inside. Aedes albopictus bites throughout the day, morning, noon, afternoon picnic time, evening. And this species established itself over the course of these few decades to run all the way up, including into northern Vermont. At the moment, Aedes aegypti is the major vector of Zika, but there's very little to stop Aedes albopictus from also becoming a vector of these viral diseases. So if you think about this, you look at this, it's much rarer to have these diseases here because Aedes aegypti really is a more tropical mosquito. It's not that present in these areas. We could go outside in next month and find thousands of Aedes albopictus in New York City. So this is worrisome. So what are the effects of climate change? Climate change is not good for mosquito-borne diseases, or really for anything else. So again, because the ecological range of mosquitoes depends on rainfall and principally temperatures. So if you look at the present-day areas that are suitable for Aedes aegypti to live, and then overlaid on these counties that have these local disease transmission, it's predicted that these warming zones will be pushed up to northern areas, again, putting New York in the crosshairs of these once tropical diseases. So let's pause for a second and look at things from what's it like to be a mosquito. So again, mosquitoes require a water source to breed. So the females will mate in the air, they'll blood feed on a person, they'll then lay eggs, and then these little larvae live in the water, turn into pupae, and then the animals emerge. And this is what it looks like in real life. So if you're out in your yard and you see these little things squiggling in the water, they're almost certainly mosquito larvae. The thing to do is to take that item and dump it to get rid of them from becoming adults. These will then mature into pupae and then do this beautiful emergence from the water where they become adult mosquitoes that then grow up to do this. So this is a female sitting on a member of my laboratory, has punctured the skin, and has filled her belly with blood. I do this too. It's not just that I'm a horrible sadist. So this is why you get these diseases, because a female who is infected will, in the course of blood feeding, quite innocently inject these diseases into your bloodstream. She's not doing it to infect you. She's doing it to get the blood. The boys are blameless. So male mosquitoes neither have the will to bite people, nor do they have the syringe-like appendage that allows them to penetrate the skin. So what do we do? I think I've convinced you nobody likes mosquitoes. Mosquitoes kill hundreds of thousands of people every year, and they sicken 500 million people a year. So it's a problem. So what can we do about it? I should also say, from the female mosquito's point of view, if she were up here giving the talk, she would say, I need it. I need the blood. I need the protein in the blood, because otherwise I won't reproduce. So it's kind of poignant, because without us and without our blood, there would be no mosquitoes, right? And she takes these enormous risks to fly out amongst us, land on us, and bite us just for her children, right? So let's take a moment and... But let's go back to being people, because we don't want them. So insecticides have in the past been very successful. So DDT, an insecticide. I spent a lot of time getting these great images. So DDT almost eradicated malaria. So DDT was a highly effective insecticide that in the 1950s depressed the levels of mosquitoes to the point where we were very close to eradicating these diseases. However, these are effective only for a while. Again, because the pressure for the mosquitoes to survive these onslaughts, to be able to get a blood meal and reproduce, is so strong that you end up getting resistance very rapidly. So you kill 99.9%, doesn't matter, because the 0.1% will live, prosper, divide, and replace. Of course, the other problem with insecticides in the case of DDT is that it caused horrible, devastating environmental problems. So these are the issues with insecticides. They're poisons, and the mosquitoes will outsmart them by eventually developing resistance. Another incredibly powerful technique, probably the single greatest reason that malaria mortality dropped from about 800,000 to about 500,000 is this technology. Very simple insecticide-treated bed nets. You and your children sleep under the bed nets. There's a physical barrier, and there's also a chemical barrier. And so this works. So these are some data from, I think, Papua New Guinea, where we looked in these different regions of the number of infective mosquito bites before bed net distribution and then after bed net distribution. So you can see in some regions, here and in these regions, you have eliminated bites over these periods of time. So this has been incredibly effective. Now, if you think about a bed net, when is a bed net going to work? A bed net is going to work when you and your children are sleeping at night. So again, because the pressure on mosquitoes to evade any of these tricks is so strong, what have the mosquitoes done? So typically mosquitoes will bite at night. So these are the malaria mosquitoes. They rest during the day, and they go out at night and hunt. So people doing a census on when mosquitoes were out flying and biting, 2011 and 2012, they're well-behaved night biters. Bed nets start to be deployed, and you get these huge spikes in daytime biting mosquitoes. So at the time that you're not sleeping under your bed net because you're awake and going about your daily activities. So this shift in the ability of mosquitoes to bite people during the day allows them to evade any attempts for us to stop them. So something that you may have heard of is using the mosquitoes themselves to stop these diseases. So what we would like to do is either kill all mosquitoes, which is difficult to do with insecticides, or prevent mosquitoes from spreading disease. And so some very clever people have been using genetics and microbiology to develop mosquitoes that either go into the community and kill their brethren, or mosquitoes that are stronger and can mount an attack against the virus that infects them. And so there's a couple of different ways to do this. I'll highlight what's a sort of a more organic way to do it, which is these funny bacteria called Wolbachia. These are bacteria that infect insect cells. And they have a funny way that if you are infected, if you're a female mosquito that's infected, all of your children will then be infected with Wolbachia. And it will interfere with your reproductive capacity. And so because it's very infective and you can go in and infect a population, people have put into practice this idea of spreading Wolbachia bacteria throughout populations. Another amazing serendipitous result is that certain strains of Wolbachia actually have antiviral activity in the mosquito. So imagine that you're carrying around in many of your cells this bacterium that's actually beneficial, that actually protects you from these pathogens. And so the way this works is that there's a couple different versions of this. The kill them all version is that normally if you have mosquitoes flying around in the city, they'll mate, produce hundreds of eggs, thousands of offspring, and that's how you get these huge populations. A variant is that you take Wolbachia-infected males that will encode death for the offspring. The males go in and find the ladies. They find the female mosquitoes wherever they are, in the gutters, in your homes, in the tires in your yard, and will mate with them. And because the male is infected with Wolbachia, none of the eggs will hatch. And this has a very rapid effect on decreasing populations of mosquitoes. And again, you use the mosquito to go in and do the job for you. And so here's just a cartoon curve of what would happen. Over time, all of the females will have been mated by these foreign Wolbachia-carrying mosquitoes, and you will drastically drop the population. Now, a problem with this is that you have to constantly replenish and release male Wolbachia-infected mosquitoes into the environment, which is costly and logistically nightmarish. So what could possibly go wrong with this, right? There are other ideas out there using genetically modified mosquitoes. There's a lot of discussion about should we do this, right? This is good. Crashing the population of mosquitoes theoretically to the bottom, in principle, because they do terrible things to humans, could be good. So things that we discuss is if you eradicate a species, number one, most likely another mosquito species will come and take its place, would be one inference. Mosquitoes actually represent a huge biomass that's important for feeding birds and bats. And so if you eradicate the species, you may have effects on other parts of the food web. Male mosquitoes, they don't bite humans, but they feed on flowers. So they may play a role as pollinators. So these are the kinds of discussions going on about the ethics of genetically modifying mosquitoes with genes or with Wolbachia. So an alternative to this is to make them stronger, to find a way to make mosquito females be resistant to the diseases that they carry. And here Wolbachia is an incredibly interesting and powerful tool when you deploy it in females. So this is the thing I just talked about, where infected males will mate with females and kill the offspring. When you deploy females that are infected with Wolbachia, whether they mate with an infected male or an uninfected male, all of the children within a few generations are then Wolbachia infected. So it's like a biological vaccine via these bacteria that will make a population of Aedes aegypti that is resistant to these diseases. These technologies are currently being rolled out in Thailand, Vietnam, South America, and Florida. And so I think this shows real promise to dealing with these diseases. And so here's a paper from 2016 showing that these strains actually are effective in reducing the transmission of Zika by the Zika vector mosquito. So what are we doing about this? What are we doing here at Rockefeller? We have lots of mosquitoes upstairs if you want to come visit us. So our approach is, let's not kill them, let's not make them stronger, let's just have them not bite humans. That's our approach. So I should tell you first that mosquitoes really love humans. So given a choice in this Thai village of biting any number of these domesticated animals or humans, the vast majority of mosquitoes are carrying blood that was derived from humans. And there's this well-known fact that some people are more attractive than others. We have been doing a lot of work in this area, and so we brought in 150 people from New York City and had them participate in this experiment where we release mosquitoes, have them fly upwind to the subject, here Laura Duval, and ask how many mosquitoes are trying to bite her. And so what we find is that you also have in your common everyday experience that some people are very attractive to mosquitoes and some people are very unattractive. So this is something that everybody observes, but there is no plausible mechanism. And it would be really important to figure out what is the mechanism, what makes this person so special versus this person. Most people want to be in the unattractive range, of course. So this is an active area. We don't have the answer yet, but I'm really excited about trying to figure out what's special about these people. So we are using our interest in chemosensory biology to figure out how mosquitoes find us. So they use visual cues, how we look. They cue in on our unique body odor, and we think that the odor is the main thing that allows some people to be mosquito magnets and some mosquito repellents. They love it when we exhale carbon dioxide, and they really love the warmth of our bodies. So this is what happens when a mosquito is landing not on your arm, but on an artificial feeder. You can see that she's getting into position. She's unsheathed her syringe. She's about to puncture this membrane, which mimics skin, and then she starts pumping. So this movie is sped up not that much. It will take her about a minute to double her body weight. It's really a remarkable, remarkable behavior. And again, she's doing it not to transmit disease to you, not to give you an itchy bite. She's doing this because she will not be able to produce children without the huge protein meal that you are giving to her. And so again, she needs this to develop eggs. Every time you get bitten, you're contributing 100 new mosquitoes into the wild. So thank you very much for your business. So, and 50 of these will become females. And then this is why disease transmission occurs, because she'll lay her eggs, she'll bite another person, she'll lay more eggs, she'll bite another person. And that's why you can get chikungunya spreading through the Caribbean basin to 1 million people in a year, people getting on planes and transmitting it. So we are interested in this idea that after she takes a blood meal, these females go through this profound suppression where they have no interest in people anymore. You cannot get them excited to get up and fly toward a person. We want to see whether we can lock them into this state where they think they've had a blood meal, where they lose interest in people. And we've made some recent progress in this area. And this progress relies on this neuropeptide signaling pathway that my colleague Corey Bargman has made major insights into in her experimental model organism. and Jeff Friedman, working in his model organism, have discovered the importance of this signaling pathway that governs hunger, satiety, and appetite in all of these different creatures. So what we have been doing is taking drugs that were developed by drug companies to hook into this feeding pathway in humans and trick mosquitoes into drinking them to see if manipulating neuropeptide-wise signaling can get them to think that they have just fed on someone and kill their appetite for us. And so I'm going to show you that these drugs work incredibly well. So this is the percent of mosquitoes that have flown up to my postdoc Laura Duvall's arm. So she has a score of about 60, so she's pretty attractive. I'm around here. I'm very unattractive to mosquitoes. If you give these females a big meal of artificial blood, they are completely suppressed. They have no interest in flying toward Laura. We would love to have mosquitoes that have no interest in flying toward humans. When we feed them this drug, you can see that they become uninterested in feeding on humans. So this is an amazing result, but we want to do better. So can we find a mosquito-selective drug, not this drug developed as a human diet drug? Can we find a drug that will work only in mosquitoes? And so using the amazing facilities we have here at Rockefeller, we've been searching around 300,000 different candidate drugs to find something that will activate this pathway in mosquitoes. And of the 24 promising candidates, something that would turn off the appetite of mosquitoes, I'm going to tell you about RU01. So here we measure that the mosquitoes love to drink this stuff, right? They'll drink sheep blood, they'll drink the carrier, and they'll drink these two drugs. However, when they drink the drug, they are suppressed. So this is the percent of mosquitoes that will fly toward the arm. You can see after sheep blood, they have no interest. And with this drug, they have no interest. So this is, I think, an interesting breakthrough in modulating the behavior of these mosquitoes, where by just feeding them this stuff, they lose interest in hunting us. And so what should we do with this? Once we show that it's safe and it actually has efficacy, you could imagine deploying traps out in your local neighborhood that will attract mosquitoes in to drink our RU01, and it will put them into a state where they have no interest in biting people. We don't need to kill all mosquitoes. We don't need to prevent all bites. We just need to have fewer bites, because every bite that you avoid represents one disease transmission event that won't happen. There used to be malaria throughout the United States up until the 1920s. So you can find my relatives died of malaria in Ohio, right? So malaria used to be endemic. We don't need to kill all mosquitoes. We just need to have fewer bites. And so with that, I want to close and thank you for your attention. And here's the takeaway, stuff that you guys need to do to not be bitten by mosquitoes. And I'd be happy to take any questions.
Leslie, that was fabulous.
Thank you. Could you say a little bit about West Nile?
I could say something about West Nile. So West Nile also is a disease that came very recently into this hemisphere. So I think it came into the U.S. around JFK. So another thing, the airports are bringing these things in. So West Nile is carried by a mosquito called Culex that has always lived in the Northeast. It's another viral disease. Now, the good thing for us is that the mosquito that spreads West Nile doesn't particularly like humans, so it kills a lot of birds because it's mostly biting birds. West Nile, for immune-compromised people, is a terrible thing, so it kills a few dozen people every year, but it would kill a lot more people if it were spread by mosquitoes that specialized on people. So it's yet another mosquito-borne disease, less dangerous because the mosquito that spreads it is not that interested in biting humans.
Did the Zika virus mutate between French Polynesia and going to Brazil so that it produced more microcephaly?
Yep, so this is the question that people working, what happened? Why is Zika so terrible in Bahia? Why wasn't it so terrible in Kenya? So people are hard at work. The genome of the Zika virus is tiny. It's just 11,000 bits of information, but it has been complicated. There isn't a simple answer where, okay, this protein became 10,000 times more virulent. So it is one of the most active areas of investigation in the field, exactly to figure out what happened, because it would be really important for vaccine development. And there are vaccines on the way. I think this is a really good news point at the end of this somewhat depressing talk, is that there will be a vaccine for Zika. I mean, they're already are signs of it. But the mechanism, I think, is fascinating. How could you go from something that gives you a little bit of a fever and flu and you forget about it to this horrible, horrible developmental defect?
Hi, I was told by an oncologist several years ago that DEET, though very effective for mosquitoes, is quite dangerous for human beings. The skin being our largest organ, we absorb it. And he had advised me and said if you keep using DEET, you could actually get MS later on. So, and in fact, he had given me an herbal formula called Bug Ban when I went to Africa. I know, and it worked. So that's why I'm asking you, what are your thoughts on DEET?
So I think this is a really important point. So, and I don't work for the industry that makes this stuff. So DEET has been registered every year by the EPA as safe. I just don't, the evidence that DEET causes the kinds of things that your physician told you is simply not there. So I guess it's this, I think DEET is, it has been proven to be incredibly effective. It's been in use, it's been in wide use worldwide for 75 years, and there really is no evidence that it's unsafe. And it comes down to, it's highly effective. If you're going into a disease endemic area, you should put as much DEET as you possibly can on all exposed areas of skin, right? So I think that makes me a little upset when people put things out there like that have no evidence. So that statement that it gives you MS is not an evidence-based statement, with all due respect to your physician.
There's a question right here.
This is very prosaic, but I had heard that the mosquito magnets don't work, and you've got it up there as something that works. How wonderful. Could you just dispel that other myth that they don't work?
So I should explain what a mosquito magnet is. It's this thing that you can buy at Home Depot. It has a propane tank that generates heat and carbon dioxide, and you put a little cartridge in that smells like human body odor. So it's like a little robotic human. So it pumps out all the cues that mosquitoes like. They really do work. I think this is something that you can ask your Home Depot representative, but it depends on where you place it. You have to place it somewhere. You have to put it really close to the humans because the mosquitoes really like to be by the humans. So you have to put it close enough to the barbecue where the mosquitoes will be distracted and get suctioned into this machine. But I've seen people open those things up and pull out thousands of mosquitoes from the basket every day. So again, talk to your Home Depot representative. They do work.
Yeah, I'd be curious if different choices in the agricultural industry have impacts on mosquito populations. I think certain crops are more attractive to mosquitoes than others, and how that might be considered in these studies.
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say that, certainly mosquitoes have, they certainly interact with plants, and agriculture certainly gives you pools of standing water, so they represent good breeding sites. I think that the truth about these human disease-carrying mosquitoes is they don't care about our agricultural fields. They really are in our cities. They really live in close proximity to humans. And so I think what's happening outside of towns, cities, and villages is sort of an incidental part of the problem, because we provide so many sources for breeding. If any of us have standing water somewhere, whether you live in a co-op apartment or a house, and anywhere, we all are responsible for breeding mosquitoes. And so I don't think they care about our agricultural crops.
Leslie, I was just wondering, how is RU01 applied to mosquitoes? And also, how close are we to some commercial application there?
So the way it's applied is that we trick them into drinking it. So we can mix it, we can make a little kind of a beverage for the mosquito that has, it's like a slightly salty solution with ATP. ATP is the currency of life. Mosquitoes are very sensitive to ATP, and they will drink anything that's mixed into an ATP solution. So that picture I have of them, they'll drink that stuff as if it were blood. So it's kind of like you're giving them an oral dose of this compound, which will then it will trick them into thinking that they have blood fed. So that's how we get it into them. We feed it to them. On a practical level, how do we feed it to them? We have to use a mosquito magnet-like technology to kind of draw them in and then have them drink it. You might ask, why don't you just kill them? And I would say because any method to kill these animals, you get resistance emerging, whereas having them take a week off from biting people to reduce the number of bites will not cause resistance.
And how close to commercial application?
How close to commercialization? We're really fortunate because the Robertson Therapeutic Development Fund funded this research, and so so where are we? I think it's always hard to give a timeline for when something becomes a product, but I think that we have about another 16 months, we'll know whether we have something that has the right sort of secret sauce of being selective enough and cheap enough to deploy.
So since you're an olfaction specialist, I trust you know a lot about pheromones, and I wonder if you've noticed any gender differences between humans and their mosquito attractiveness, and whether or not it varies with the menstrual cycle, any hormone use, or with postmenopausal females.
Yep. Also, I actually collect these ideas because we have no idea what it is. So I think, but we know. I was intrigued by this idea that everybody tells me women have sweeter blood, and women are more attractive to mosquitoes than men. So we have enough statistical power to say that that is not the case. So we don't find any evidence that women in general are more attractive to mosquitoes than men. These other questions about menopausal, postmenopausal, they require really intricate clinical studies that we haven't done. You can imagine you have to really carefully control that. We haven't done it, but we don't see any gender selectivity. It's something else.
There's a question here.
How do you sift through 240,000 drugs to get RU01?
We have robots. We can give you robots. So we have these, I love this stuff. So we have this great robot high-throughput screening center. We have a plastic dish with 384 wells. And so you just do them 384 wells at a time. The robot picks it up and squirts stuff, and then we put it in the machine. So yeah, my postdoc did that, a couple of months she went through that many compounds.
Is there a question here? Oh, no, right here.
Hi, I was wondering, do we know what the lifespan of something like Zika is in mosquitoes and in humans in terms of the life cycle that it continues to be reproduced?
Oh, yeah, I think this is the question. So how long, I think your question is, if you're infected with Zika, is it cleared or is there a reservoir? And that is, so young women in Brazil or anywhere in Central South America looking to get pregnant, there is no answer for it at the moment. I think that the worst news was that they took a couple of men who had active Zika infection and then sampled their seminal fluid every few months, and they found live Zika 9 months after the infection event. Now, the power of those studies is low. It was just a few people, but I think this is why these governments, I think El Salvador said, we recommend that women delay pregnancy for 2 years. They just wanted to have a timeout period until they can figure out what's really going on. So it's dangerous because we don't, you're asking exactly the right question.
Question right here.
Switching gears a little bit, I'm wondering if you see applications from working with mosquitoes to working with combating Lyme disease and ticks and other blood-borne infectious disease.
So Lyme disease is spread by ticks, not by mosquitoes, and it's probably one of the most neglected diseases. There's very little funding that goes into studying Lyme, and we specifically, in screening those, using the robots to screen, we were specifically looking for drugs that will also work on ticks. Because ticks also have this, they really fill up on blood when you pick them off of yourself or your pets. Like, they really fill up on blood, and they'll go through a very sustained period of not being interested in biting. And so we may have some candidates that will work on the targets in deer ticks, because that is really important. I wonder if someone can tell me, there's a veterinary vaccine against Lyme disease. I cannot figure out why I can't be immunized with that vaccine. Maybe somebody could tell me why that is, but there is a good dog vaccine for Lyme.
Leslie, I'll ask a question. So Zika and microcephaly, neurogenesis is most robust as in the developing human. How about in the adult human, where we already have our cortex established, but we still have replenishment of new neurons that are being born all the time? Is there a possibility that Zika also affects neurogenesis in adult brain?
I think it's certainly, a lot of the work, thank you for that question, boss, first of all. So a lot of this work studying how Zika gets into and kills brain cells has been done either in chunks of brain tissue or in cultured cells, where in principle what you suggest is possible. So I think that's worrisome. I think even more worrisome is that microcephaly it's easy. You don't need to be a physician to diagnose microcephaly. So these are profound effects. I think that people are worried about what if Zika's going in and doing like a little bit of damage in your auditory cortex or your visual cortex that's not visible as microcephaly. So I think that people are watching this bump of babies born in South America to figure out if there's additional neurological symptoms. But it is certainly plausible that you would. In fact, there is this autoimmune Guillain-Barré syndrome that adults who are infected with Zika, there's a huge spike in this autoimmune syndrome in adults.